Christians are great. Draw joint palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How y'all doing today? Good. Let's see. I think we'll be all right. I know when people come in, everybody wants to go straight to the back, but it ends up filling up. That's why I'm always trying to move people forward, so now we don't have 30 people piled in the back. There's something that you're just, okay. You're good, thanks. Something that's been like coming up recently, I think just in various groups and things like that. So Buddhist teachings, there's what we refer to as two wings. And you think of a bird flying in a healthy manner, there's two wings. And you don't have one wing, makes it a little bit difficult. And the two wings of Buddhist practice are wisdom and compassion. And the wisdom piece, people often forget. Meaning they think that Buddhist practice is just, I'm just going to open my heart and be so loving and kind and compassionate and forgiving and foolish. Because I'm Buddhist, right? And the wisdom piece is critical. Breaking down what wisdom is, that's a whole other topic. I'm not even attempting to bring that up right now. But you have to try to apply both. And very often in Buddhist circles, Buddhist groups, especially those who are new to Buddhism, think that by compassion, that means you're just supposed to be okay with everything and everyone. Or that you're supposed to become a doormat, so to speak, and allow people to just walk over you because you're being this kind, compassionate Buddhist. Or that if you're not doing something you should be doing, a responsibility, a job, a task, whatever it is, that the Buddhist people are just supposed to be like, oh, it's okay, you're Buddhist, right? Wisdom says, what is our role and responsibility in life? And how can we do that while practicing compassion, but not ignoring the wisdom piece to all this? So watch for that throughout your day. Often we find ourselves getting, anyone get upset ever? Right. That hand went up quick. That's why you're in the front row, right? You hear it quicker, so you actually learn faster. A+ student. That was my problem growing up. My last name is Zlotnik, so I was always alphabetical, so I was always in the back. I was doomed from the get-go, you know. Just took so long for information to get to me. That was my problem. But don't be fooled by this kind of blind Buddhist compassion. That means like Buddhists are just supposed to always be okay with everything you're doing, because there's no wisdom in that. If people are harming themselves or harming others, if people are not fulfilling their roles or responsibilities, if people are not being held accountable, right, there's no wisdom there. So, I mean, even when you break down the Buddhist teachings, right, there's a lot of steps that he talked about. You know, we talk about all the time: the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Six Paramitas. There's a lot of things other than just I'm going to smile and give hugs and, you know, pretend everything's okay. And I think there's a balance, and I'll kind of close with this thought before we start meditation. There's a balance there where in your lives you want to try to hold people accountable to what they're responsible for. And sometimes saying no to people, sometimes calling people out on things they're not doing, sometimes reminding them that they should maybe work a little bit harder. These wise things are also very compassionate. So don't confuse Buddhist compassion to equal just like blind niceness. You know, the words kind of tough love come to mind right now. And I'm bringing this up, it has nothing to do with anybody sitting in this room right now, even though very often I do pick on something that's going on with someone and nobody ever knows. But it's just a general reminder that when you finish your Dalai Lama or Pema Chodron book on compassion and kindness, it doesn't mean you have to go into the world and not speak up. So don't be afraid to call yourself out, to call others out, because that's also really important. Tibetan Buddhist practice, they do debate quite a bit. They debate teachings, and it's almost like a sparring match. I mean, there's no like punches thrown or anything like that. But there's a lot of debate and discourse and disagreement. And too often I think people get this idea that Buddhists are all just supposed to kick back and not care about what's going on. And I can tell you, if that was my approach at this place for 15 years, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. So, you know, yeah. And often in those moments where, well, I'll end with this story. One of my first Zen masters at the temple down the street. This was 2004, it doesn't matter. And we got into this argument. We didn't get along at all. And go figure. I accused her of being all wisdom and no compassion. And she accused me of being all compassion and no wisdom. And ultimately, I realized she was 100% correct. I just didn't understand quite yet how to bring wisdom into Buddhist practice. And it's a skill like anything else. So don't be afraid when necessary to open your heart and show love, but also be tough on people, because sometimes it's necessary and needed. So, all right. So with that, we'll start with the meditation. To all of you who are joining us, our millions of YouTube followers, welcome. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. Feel free to chime in and say hello. So meditation practice, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit and breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps. Slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair or whatever you're sitting on, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments of the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, the practice of meditation, to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful. Whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, and disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy, not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix it. It makes you become aware of why your life is a crazy mess, and then you have to make changes. Which is something that's very difficult for many of us. Because we don't like change. Especially when it requires us having to change. The Buddha's teachings on impermanence addresses this. All conditioned phenomena are subject to change, including ourselves, which we tend to resist. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's not a business. It's a practice. It's a way of life. It's sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do, and putting that into practice. And we have opportunities every day and every moment of our lives to practice this. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I really always prefer, other than my usual ramblings, to respond to what's on your mind, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning, and I'll respond to your questions. And again, for those joining virtually, welcome. Thanks for being here. Feel free, there's a chat box somewhere on the screen. Feel free to type in any questions you may have, and I'll do my best to respond there as well. So, questions? Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot lately about how different religions have spread around the world. And so I grew up Catholic, and I think just thinking about Catholicism is like, a lot of the way that it spread was through violence or through removing people from their cultures and like forced assimilation. But from my perspective, it doesn't feel like Buddhism has done that, at least like in sheer numbers, just like fewer Buddhists than Catholics or Christians. But at the same time, like I know the Buddha had people that he taught and wanted them to spread it. So obviously, like people still want to spread Buddhism, but I don't know if like you can talk about like, is there like what did the Buddha say? Like how he wanted it to spread compared to maybe other religions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could sum that up in about 12 hours.
Can you do an elevator pitch?
Yes, let me my elevator pitch on the spread of Buddhism. You didn't see all the little Dharma Bum Buddhists on the corners out there with street signs and big arrows that said "Join us." The helicopter that had the banner behind that said "Free Intro to Buddhism" at 11 o'clock on Saturday. Oh my God, such a great question, and I'm just stalling because there's like 1,000 things I could say. So my hope is that you ask this question every single time you're here so I can give you a different answer. A couple things come to mind, and let me just preface this. For those who maybe didn't hear, you started with, what's your name? Sorry. Molly. You started with, you grew up Catholic, and obviously Catholicism has spread, and a lot of that spreading was through violence and kind of, I forget your exact terms, but really taking over cultures or religions and things like that. Say again?
Forced assimilation.
Forced assimilation. And I'm repeating this mainly for anyone in the back or YouTube that didn't hear. But from your perspective, it doesn't seem to be that much of that in Buddhism, yet the Buddha had people he talked to and wanted it to spread. So how does that all work, right? What did the Buddha say about that? So a couple things that come to mind, and I'll kind of jump around here. The first thing I'll say is Buddhist teachings are very clear. There's an expression that says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I don't mean that in context of, because at the end I always say I'm not a teacher, so I don't mean that in like I'm the teacher and all you students have appeared. But it's a general statement that says Buddhism is not something that you're pushing at people. It's not something that you're like trying to reel people into. You know, like we don't wait 4 weeks, then you drink Kool-Aid and introduce you to the real Buddhist teachings, you know. The other thing to point out at this moment is that somebody asked the Dalai Lama years ago if this country needed more Buddhists in the US. And he said, the world has enough Buddhists. This country just needs more people who are peaceful and happy. We're not concerned with like producing Buddhists, making more Buddhists. Being Buddhist doesn't even matter. Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, pagan, whatever you are or lack thereof, just be kind. Okay? Another thought. Buddhism, as it spread, and I'll kind of jump back to, I've got like a series of like 8 things firing in my head at once, so I'm trying to stay focused. Going back to the time of the Buddha, as you referenced, right? When he was born, he was Hindu. So he was raised Hindu, he was taught Hindu teachings, and that's what existed at that time. Buddhism didn't exist when Siddhartha was born. He was Hindu. He then left the palace at 29 as a prince and roamed the Himalayan mountains for 6 years, for anyone who doesn't know the brief story. And then at 35, he sat down and said, I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer. He understood that all of his suffering came from the nature of his own mind, his greed, his anger, his ignorance. He taught the Four Noble Truths on suffering, the cause of suffering, the ending of suffering, and the path, which is the Eightfold Path. And then for 45 years, he taught. And then he died at 80. But you're absolutely right. It doesn't stop there, right? But a couple things. He was very clear, and people asked him 12 or 14 questions that he would not answer. And one of them was, should we believe in gods and goddesses? Now, they weren't referring to the modern day God. Often people ask me, well, what did Buddha think about Jesus? You know what he thought about Jesus? Nothing, because Jesus wasn't born until 500 years later. He knew all about Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Parvati, all about Hindu gods and goddesses, but you know, Christianity, Catholicism, all this stuff exists. But what he told them when they asked him about what about a belief in gods and goddesses, he said, I'm just a human. If you want to believe in gods and goddesses, do. If you don't, don't. I'm just here to teach you how to be kind to people, right? Something you said, which I'm not a scholar, I'm not a historian, so I don't approach Buddhism this way, but I know enough to at least share some thoughts on it and feel comfortable in what I'm saying. While yes, he taught it and he roamed around and he shared it, he wasn't in this like mindset of let's take over the world with Buddhism. It just wasn't the approach. And he was very clear. He didn't want people to view him as a god or worship him or idolize him. He didn't want statues made of him. That clearly didn't work, right? I talked about this last class, I think. The very first image ever of the Buddha was actually footprints. Because about 100 years after he died, somewhere around there, they came together and said, well, we want something to show for it, right? The student said some good stuff. We want something to show for it. So they made images of footprints. And that was actually the first image ever that they wanted something to survive. So about a little brief history lesson here for those who don't know. About 100 years after he died or so, Buddhism goes south, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and you have the development of Theravada, or what's called Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism, Southeast Asia. 500-600 years later, it goes into China, Japan, Korea, and you have the development of what's called Mahayana Buddhism. And then 1,000 years after he died, it goes into Tibet, and you have the development of Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism. These are the 3 major schools of Buddhism, and there's multiple schools within all of that, without going into all that right now. And then 80, 100, 120 years ago, it works its way west, Europe, US, Canada. Fascinating, a couple things is the first thing that enters a country before Buddhism spreads is the image of the Buddha. So as much as he never wanted images, right? When merchants, traders left going through the Silk Road, they would bring monks with them for protection against the Mongolian tribes. And they had little images of the Buddha as charms, as good luck. And so all these images of the Buddha started making its way along the Silk Road. I remember like 20 years ago, a Buddha statue ended up in the window of Z Gallery downtown at 5th and Market. Right? You think anybody had any idea who that like Bodhisattva was? No, but it looked cool. Watch old images, episodes of Charlie's Angels. Remember Sir Charlie's Angels, right? Buddhist statues everywhere. So images are seen, right? And people are like, what are those things? Okay. When Buddhism went into China, they say it meshed, kind of coming to one of your comments or questions. It didn't like take over Taoism or Confucianism or Shintoism. It meshed with it. It said, look, here is your existing religious, philosophical views and way of life, and here's Buddhist teachings. How can these two play nicely together? It doesn't quite work that way with other religions, right? Most other religious folks for the last 2,000 years haven't shown up and said, let's see how we can play nicely together, right? As Buddhism has come into the West, and this has been all I've looked at for the last 20 years, that's why I said I can sum it up in 12 hours. It's not here to take over Christianity. I was raised Jewish, right? I'm what they call a Jew, Jewish Buddhist. Richard Gere made that phrase popular, okay? Buddhism is not here to like destroy Christianity or Catholicism or Judaism or Muslim or any other religion. It's not here to actually do anything to those religions. You know what it's here for? You. So keep your religious faiths, if you have them, and if you want them, and if they're important to you. And then look at what the Buddha said and realize, okay, how can I also bring this into my life? So many years ago referred to Buddhism as a software upgrade. They were raised Christian or Catholic right now, but one or the other. And they said that when they learned Buddhist teachings, it actually brought them closer to Christ. And I think that's such a beautiful application of Buddhist teachings. I've never studied Christianity, and I'm a terrible Jew, but I'm pretty sure everything Jesus said was pretty right on. If we all did what Jesus said, we'd be living in a healthier, happier world, right? The general view of Buddhist historians and scholars is they refer to Jesus as a bodhisattva, which is a fully enlightened being who was there to help people. So definitely not a takeover. And also, like, so we try to model that with the Dharma Bum Temple we started 15 years ago. What's on the top of this building? A cross. That cross has been there for 95 years. Now, truth be told, we may eventually put a Dharma wheel around it, right? But we're not getting rid of the cross. We're embracing the history that exists in this building, in this temple, what was a Christian mystic church for 90 plus years. And I think that's the way Buddhism really should embrace everything, is welcome it, appreciate it. Whatever, we tend to get a lot of people through this place for the last 15 years that are really hung up on their old religion and coming really angry, really bitter. When we first moved here and there were pews, right? We still have a lot of them. This place was filled with pews. We had people came in and they were like, oh no, there's a pew. That doesn't work for me. Like literal triggers from the pews. The problem isn't the pew. The problem is your mind and your relationship to it. And that's what Buddhism is helping to address. So, does that help at all?
Yeah.
Just some thoughts. I'll stop there, or I really will keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So Buddhists have really cornered the humongous statue game. I think like more than half of all the world's largest statues are Buddhist statues.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. So somebody asked, his name is Venerable Master Hui Huang. He grew up here in the US, 18 years old, went to UCSD, graduated, I think, an engineering degree, got into Buddhism when he was like 14, moved to Taiwan, ordained, moved to Taiwan. He's been a master of a temple for the last 20 plus years. When you go to a lot of Zen centers or Zen temples, you know what you'll see on their shrine? A rock. Just a rock. And somebody asked him one time, they said, Master, why does that temple just have a rock? And he said to them, if you can see the rock and recognize that there's no difference in looking at the image of a Buddha and the image of a rock, then just use the rock. But if you don't think that the rock is the same thing as the image of a Buddha, then use the image of the Buddha until you recognize there's no difference.
But why so big?
Why not bigger?
Fair. Because they can, I guess.
Why not smaller? Why not bigger? Why not darker? Why not lighter? Why not heavier? Why not? Always explore our relationship to our curiosities and discomfort with something. That's what's critical. Yeah. And look at what they represent. I wish they were larger. I wish we had Buddhist statues on every single corner, just like Starbucks.
So we put them in the Starbucks.
In the Starbucks. Just never in the bathroom, please. Seriously, I mean, it's really disrespectful. But yeah. There was a hand back there, and then we'll go here. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we said earlier, being balanced with the compassion and the wisdom. I'm struggling as a parent with holding my daughter to account for her responsibilities and, trying to be compassionate and kind in doing so. And I've pretty much given up on the, I'm keeping the compassion, but I'm not pushing or,
Yeah.
I thought it was a bit of maybe expectations, right? And not, so that was very profound to me, what you said earlier, and exactly why I'm here,
Mm-hmm.
to hear that. So I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, I knew that. That's why I went into that.
I think you did.
How old's your daughter?
17.
Okay, I thought you were going to say 7.
Oh, no.
So, anyone else here survived raising a 17-year-old? Just a couple hands. Survive's the right word, right? So here's the thing, and there's no answer to this. If I had the answer to this, then that'd be phenomenal. But just some additional thoughts on finding the balance of raising a teenager, a 17-year-old daughter, and the balance of wisdom and compassion. You are not alone in many of the people who come here with the same issue. At 17, I get it. Legally, they're under your ownership until 18. Guardianship, maybe the better word. But at 17, they're doing what they want. And they are not listening to you potentially at all. I'm just speaking from personal experience. They know you love them. They know you care about them. You know they have their best interest in your heart. But you know what they have? Their best interest in their heart. And their best interest is not the wisest, most compassionate thing in the world. So you run this really fine line, which I'm sure you're already doing, of just letting them know you love them and care about them, but just short of locking them in their room and throwing away and boarding up the windows and throwing away the keys, there's not much you can do. You're probably not going to do that, and I don't advise that. I don't want to get in trouble here, right? But they're on their own. And I've never raised kids, so I cannot speak to it on that level. But working with enough people who have, and having gone through it on the other end, and believe me, there were times my parents wished they could have boarded me up in a room and thrown away the keys and locked and boarded. Yeah, some people here have known me since I was 4 years old, right? There's not much you can do.
Yeah.
Love them, let them know you love them, and hope that eventually they work through their own stuff and cycle back many years later to love you just the same. Because you very well know that the more you push and push and push, it just drives them further and further away. And it does suck to have that reality and to say my 17-year-old doesn't listen to anything I say and they do what they want to do and they're causing a lot of pain and harm and trouble. And if they're not locked up.
Well, I've noticed since I pulled back and just shown complete compassion and love, she leaves her door open now. So there's a lot of positive signs.
Sure.
But what you said initially though about saying what are the vulnerabilities, just saying them sometimes triggers her.
Yes.
But saying gently and less often has been really helpful. So I'm glad that I'm okay at least saying, what her responsibilities are.
For sure, for sure.
Like, that was surprising to me. I don't know why I thought Buddhists are just nothing but love.
No, nothing but love will not get you where you need to.
So
You know,
a little.
only gets you so far. Tough love is incredibly important, you know? You have any idea how many people I've pissed off in the last 15 years running this temple? But I've done that because you have to keep this place safe and protected and a healthy space of refuge for those who show up. And if people treat people and places and things poorly and don't take care of things, that has a negative impact on everyone around you. So you have to be very mindful of that.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Life.
and maybe you're aware, maybe you're not, and we have, we have a family song to hear.
Oh, yeah. Huge birthday.
No, I'm talking about you.
Oh, no.
Oh, well, yeah. My 17-year-old needs help, but I don't. We're just big 17-year-olds, my friend. The reason I bring that up is the family song, which is here once a month. It's the kids are downstairs, the teenagers not coming. Don't even try to get them here. You need it. You need to sit in the room with other parents who are going through the same thing you're going through and saying, how do I love and care for my child when they completely ignore me and they're 17 and they're drunk and they're stoned and they're locked in their room and they don't listen to anything I say? What do? You need to sit with other people who are going through that.
I'm here.
So, yeah. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And then pray. Yeah.
Oh, this was.
It's going back, I know, but yeah. Sorry.
I'm really off track.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of my daughter when she was a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
They come around, so I can testify. And she was off the rails, but my subject was back on the statue thing.
Yeah.
It's just a comment. When I traveled through Southeast Asia, and I hadn't even recognized Buddhism yet, and I was so moved by all the statues.
Yeah.
And especially in Thailand, they're out in the open. In Bangkok, they're on the street corner, and people are just picking up these incense sticks and waving and worshiping out in public. And I was just affected by that so much. It was like a demonstration of how sacred they took these statues, and we don't have that around here. We're all hidden in churches, and you don't talk about your religion. So maybe that's why I was eventually drawn here, because it drew me.
Yeah.
And whatever that quality is that they see in these statues, and they're everywhere. So they have endless temples.
Yeah, it's a beautiful reverence to them. It's interesting enough that you have no idea how many military folks over the years that have come through here or other temples because of their time deployed overseas, where they had so much just visual contact. And so that there's a teaching very specifically that says, once you encounter just the image of the Buddha, and I could have said this earlier, but there's a teaching that says once you see the image of the Buddha or get exposed to the Buddhist teachings at all, it is the seed that is planted in your consciousness for endless time. And then when the seed ripens, kind of also coming back to your question, when the seed ripens, meaning when the person is at a place in their life they want to explore that, they do. Yeah. But it has to be at the right time when the person is ready, I mean, Buddhism, the college kids joke, Buddhism addresses our greed, our anger, and our ignorance, right? Buddha's core teachings, Four Noble Truths. Second teaching, the three poisons. We suffer because of our greed, our anger, and our ignorance. So we practice generosity, compassion, and wisdom. So not a lot of people always want to wake up to the fact that, like, oh yeah, I'm greedy, I'm angry, and I'm ignorant. Come join us, right? It's not really a street sign out there. But you have to be ready for that. Because denial and blaming everybody else is so much easier. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
This is a question about the practices itself when thoughts coming,
Yeah.
which I'm sure everybody has them. So when I work during the day, whenever a thought comes when I'm, trying to focus, I write it down and I don't worry about it or think about it. But when you're practicing and thoughts come, I try to release them and do a body scan, which helps me. But there are times when an important thing comes up and I worry about that, am I gonna remember it afterwards? So how do you and everyone, deal with that?
So the question is that in your practice, going through your day, you're able to sometimes recognize thoughts, release them, but when you're doing your seated meditation practice, thoughts arise, you do a body scan, which brings you back to the present moment, but when it's an important thought, you want to make sure you don't forget it? Yeah. Well, there's two ways to look at this. If it's that important, it'll come back to you. There's actually 1,000 ways to look at this. I just came up with a couple. One is, if it's that important, it'll come back to you. Two is to recognize, ultimately, the practice of meditation is not to hold on or grasp any thoughts whatsoever, regardless of the importance or not. Now, obviously, you're sitting in meditation and all of a sudden you realize, I don't want to panic anyone, but all of a sudden you realize, the stove is on. Important. You don't stove is on, release, back to the breath. Stove is on, release, back. No, get up, go check the stove, and come. So importance is I guess, the relationship of that importance to safety, things like that. Or maybe it's just some this is some deep thing that I just figured out, or just popped into my head out of nowhere, and I've been struggling with this for 17 years. And all of a sudden I'm in meditation and I have this thought, this realization. You're without thinking about it, something came to you. Then be with that. Write it down. Right? There's no laws or rules that meditation means you can't recognize a thought and want to be with that thought. Or just continue to think about that. And just instead of that meditation has some structure or guidelines or rules you must follow, that's important. Let me sit with this for a little bit and think about it. And just use that meditation time. And this is the opposite of everything I always say. But based on that question, then use that. Explore what just came up that's important to you. Beautiful. Because that important thought might be way more important than the reason I say it's odd. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, go with it. Usually, when I share meditation, give some instructions around it. The practice is to, as thoughts arise, recognize them and release of what they are. So, thought arises. As an example, this is what I'm working on. Thought arises. Recognize it. Hunger. Release that thought. Back to the breath. Breath in, breath out. Next thought. Hunger. Recognize it. Release it. Back to the breath. That's what I want to do. What I'm working on doing. What I don't want to do. Thought arises. Hunger. I'm hungry. What am I going to eat? I want a burrito. I'm going to go to Pokies. I want chips. I want some water. Right? Next thing you know, I sat for 5 minutes thinking about the burrito I want to eat. And I'm probably hungrier than I was 5 minutes ago. Right? So the thought of hunger about a burrito is not nearly as important as something you might be referring to, right? So I want to work on just releasing those thoughts. Now the question is, why? Why is that? You ever been angry about something for 25 years? Quick show of hands, right? Half of you went up before I even, right? Most of you know me well enough to know where that was going. How long have you been holding on to that thing?
25 years.
25 years. And when did it happen? Now there you are. So my apologies for bringing this up. But now here we are at this moment with an opportunity to sit with what's been making us angry for 25 years. This is our mind's inability to be in the present moment. So seated meditation is an opportunity to practice whatever thought arises, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Thoughts arise, recognize them, come back to the present moment. So when we go through our day and a thought arises and we're triggered and something's upsetting us, there's a thought. I don't have to, a lot of metaphors around airplanes during meditation, right? As it gets louder and louder and louder over your head, and then as it gets further away, what happens? It gets quieter and quieter. So these are our thoughts. It's right here. Don't jump on the plane, because you're just going to keep riding that thought for the next 20 years. It doesn't mean the past didn't exist. It doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean you can't look at it when you want to. But what we're working on is not dwelling in thoughts our whole lives. Sometimes it's good to look back and learn and, grow and see where we screwed up, see where we were hurt, see what pain, we were caused, what experiences we went through. Sometimes these things are healthy to look at. And sometimes it reaches a point where it's not healthy anymore. And that's up to each individual. Yeah. Any final thoughts or questions before we close? Yes. Yeah.
That idea of letting the thought go. I've heard it phrased, don't energize those thoughts, don't energize those emotions. And that kind of clicked with me.
For sure.
So maybe it does for anybody else.
Yeah. The idea, don't energize it. The thoughts don't energize it. Don't feed them. Don't jump on the train with them. But when I think of energize, I think of like power, so don't give it, it's a toy that doesn't work. Don't put batteries in it, Now I'm thinking of the old Energizer Bunny commercials. You think your head is a mess. This thing is screwed up more than anyone, so. All right, we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to more than 6 million lives that were lost during this pandemic, and to their family and friends who continue to suffer to this day. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you all head out. And Bill, my apologies. I just saw your question here now. What is prayer to Buddhism? And since you're here all the time, I just ask if you can, maybe next class, if it's Tuesday or Saturday or whatever, bring that up and I'll address that. I don't want to get into all that right now, but sorry for if it was there earlier. Sorry I didn't see it. So next time I'll address when you're here, what is prayer to Buddhism, because it definitely exists. And it's probably different from how people might perceive it to be, or exactly the same. But I'll talk about that next time. So thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to bring Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have practices being led by different people. So our temple is not one specific lineage or tradition of Buddhism. We have people who lead from all different schools of Buddhism. So pick a night, show up, and that's it. We have a recovery sangha. Anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be, that meets here consistently a couple times a week for the last 12 years. That's on the website. And as I alluded to, family sangha. Right now we're still doing once a month. It was actually this morning, but that's once a month, Saturday from 10 to 11:30. So all the parents are up here addressing exactly what you were looking at. The kids are downstairs with Lisa. She's been a special ed teacher forever, and she led our kids class for 10 years. And then we corral the toddlers and, hopefully just keep them alive and breathing while everybody else is hanging out. So we always say parents, kids, toddlers, and teens. So that's all there. Other than that, Buddha for You is downstairs if you need anything. We have no cleaning crew. We are it. So always Saturday afterwards, there's an opportunity. We want to water outside. If you just meet out front, someone will direct you. You can pick up some leaves. There's trash in the bathroom, probably needs to get thrown away. There's a list by the door if anybody wants to take 5 minutes and wipe down some handles or anything like that. So nobody else cleans, we are it. So if you have an opportunity to help out a little bit, that's always appreciated. Thank you for being here. I wish you well and good luck.
Thank you.